exploring minds through insightful conversation. This is the Ian Scotto Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Ian Scotto Podcast. I, of course, am Ian Scotto, and joined right now by a guy I've been wanting to get on for a while, Adam Kokesh. I'm glad you can come on, man. How's everything going?
Outstanding. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
First of all, where are you? You're a guy who's like always traveling, always doing all different things, and I know you're somewhere that's not home right now.
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting life lately. I'm in Minnesota. I'm getting ready to speak at the Libertarian Party State Convention here, and I'll be flying back tomorrow. So it's kind of an in-and-out thing. You know, last weekend I was in Dallas for the minting of the new Anna versus the Man voluntarism coin at the Mulligan Mint, and you can see that. That's for agoristmetals.com. And next weekend I'm actually flying back to Santa Fe, New Mexico, my hometown, to help my father move, because he's jumping ship from the totalitarian state of New Mexico, heading up north to Colorado, and then I'll be back home, and then it's just back into the routine, and punctuated by lots of fun random visits.
Dude, this is an insane schedule. You are living proof that potheads are not lazy. I mean, because
I don't fly the planes myself. I just get stoned and get on the planes every weekend.
Yeah, but I mean, you're going to all these events. You're constantly doing things. I mean, you're not a guy. If people think you're just someone who's on Twitter posting about this stuff, you live it. You do these meetings. You speak at all these events. I mean, it's just a packed schedule, man.
Oh wait, I forgot. Yeah, so the weekend after Santa Fe, then I'm going to Philly for Smoke Down Prohibition 5, and then the next weekend it's a movie screening in North Carolina. And then I get to stay home for my monthly poker night with my buddies the next weekend. And then, let's see, the weekend after that, it's, we got Gay Parade in D.C., so I'll be covering that. And then there's Pork Fest, and then, which I don't have plans to go to yet. And then Freedom Fest. So, yeah, I guess I'm staying pretty busy.
Yeah, ridiculous. Well, before the people even, we get into who you are for anybody who isn't familiar with you, I first spoke to Adam back when I was on WRHU at Hofstra University, and you were doing like a lot of activist stuff, and you were doing stuff with Iraq Veterans Against the War and stuff for rallies for Ron Paul. And the one thing that stood out about you, and that kind of has given you a name, is you do not give a fuck if you get arrested. You will do, and if you have a political point to make at any of these rallies and you're not supposed to be protesting in a certain space, you're a guy who doesn't care, and which is awesome. And I think that's how you gain some notoriety. Started speaking at these Ron Paul events, so you gained my attention, and I had you on like a couple of times, and later on down the line you ran for Congress. So basically, fast forward to now, I still had your number, and you were down to do the podcast, which I really appreciate because you've done so much more since then. So for people who aren't really familiar with Adam Kokesh and what you do, or Adam versus the Man, which anybody listening could visit at adamversustheman.com or check out Adam on Twitter at Adam Kokesh. Let the people know your history of how you got to where you are at this point and what you're doing now.
Well, let's see. Where do we start with that? I mean, I joined the Marines when I was 17. Really wanted to go early. I enlisted at 17, went to boot camp when I was 18 as a reservist, went to college in Southern California, volunteered to go to Iraq in 2004, came back, realized that, even though I knew before the war was not in our country's best interest, that it was certainly not in hindsight, and even what we were doing was a bad idea. So I got active with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and I was surrounded by lefties, and that really was an important thing for me. I should say, I first tried to go back to Iraq and got in trouble for bringing a pistol back the first time, the day after getting a commendation medal. And I was just disgruntled enough when I got out to start questioning things. And that was really important for me, and I think it's an important part of the freedom movement, and I think society's relationship to government in general. And I don't mean to play the victim card for myself, because I don't consider myself one, but the more victims of government there are, the more people who are in jail for victimless crimes, the more people who get screwed over by a zealous law enforcement officer, the more people who have businesses shut down and opportunities squandered because of government bureaucrats, the more people are going to look at government differently and are going to be ready to hear the message.
Sure.
So that's that was an important turning point for me. But also then being involved with the Iraq Veterans Against the War, being surrounded by lefties in the anti-war movement, I was a libertarian. I was relatively alone in the movement, but not to say that there weren't other anti-war libertarians who were active, but
you're saying the movement as a whole it just wasn't your politics, even though you agreed with the message of being against the war.
Oh, yeah, of course. And to the extent that they were able to stay on message, I was able to be a part of it. And or to the extent that I was able to define the message myself. I was able to do that to a significant degree as a very prominent member and very active, effective member of Iraq Veterans Against the War, and as a board member of the organization as well. So I was like, I'm a libertarian. I know I'm right. I just got to prove it,
Sure.
And I was a minarchist. I was an unthinking constitutionalist, and when I was confronted with these liberal arguments, I was like, I've got to have the irrefutable, airtight case to make for why I'm right. It's not just, well, less government is better, and I prefer this. It couldn't be that. It had to be, no, A plus B equals C, and therefore liberty. Not just sort of, because, and this really bothers me. This is why, you have to either take Glenn Beck and Bill Maher as libertarians because they call themselves libertarians, or you have to have, a better definition that's more philosophically oriented or that's more intellectually complete. And that's why I became a voluntarist, anarcho-capitalist kind of libertarian.
I'm wondering, I never heard the term voluntarist until you. Is that a term you thought of, or that you're just helping to popularize?
I would say helping to popularize, and I think bringing it to more prominence in the movement right now, like with the voluntarism coin that we just made. But it's, Ron Paul has described himself as a voluntarist without the Y, and they're like pretty much interchangeable, voluntarist and voluntarist. A lot of activists more recently started using voluntarist because it's easier to communicate, and I really do prefer that term. But, it all kind of describes the same thing. But the voluntarist ideal specifically is that all human interactions or relations should be voluntary. They should be free of force, fraud, and coercion.
Sure.
And that's really important, and that's the moral foundation of libertarianism as far as I'm concerned. So, different people, Ron Paul will use a different term, but a lot of people confuse that with volunteerism, which obviously is not the same thing. And, a lot of people will try to use the term anarcho-capitalism, which is the one that Murray Rothbard coined. And obviously,
Penn Jillette uses, all the time as he describes his views as anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you take the two most hated possible words to describe what you believe in and put them together in a single term?
Yeah, voluntarist sounds a lot more, it sounds a lot friendlier.
Yeah, that's the idea. We're friendly in the liberty movement. We want people to cooperate and get along and not be subject to coercion. So that's really important, and that's where that term, I think comes from. I don't know if there's a specific origin. Maybe I should know more about that. But
I'm going to say you invented it because I didn't hear it until you.
All right. Well, I can't take credit.
Well, fast forward, though, to, around the time I met you, and a little bit further down, actually, you decided to run for Congress. And I actually got to meet you in person when we were at a Rand Paul event running for Senate at Webster Hall when he was running for Kentucky Senate. What made you run for Congress? And also, did you think you stood any chance in the world, or were you just trying to make a point, really?
Well, I was running to win. And I mean, I don't know how I feel about that now, but no, I was definitely running to win. We raised $250,000 in 15 months and placed a very, very strong second with I think just under 40% of the vote in the primary. But we outspent our opponent because we were stabbed in the back by the Republican Party, who we thought we could trust. And,
I remember when you were running. There were basically these neocons doing anything they could to discredit you. I remember seeing pieces on Hot Air by Michelle Malkin being like, this guy isn't one of us. He's not a Republican. Don't vote for him. He's crazy. Yeah. And the thing is, this is a woman who wrote a book justifying internment, who's Asian herself, which how could someone of Asian descent feel that it was okay that we intern Japanese Americans? Like, I know that you're of a Jewish background, as am I. It would be like us writing a book justifying the Holocaust. I mean, for her to come out like that and make you look crazy, but because she's on Hannity and she's on all these other mainstream media sources, she's somehow legit and we should discredit you, I thought was absolutely insane.
Yeah. I mean, that was sort of what the reason that was relevant was because at that point I had an opponent in the race, and I told the Republican Party there, hey, I'm not running to represent the Republican Party except in this race, where if you put up a more libertarian candidate, you are going to get, you're going to get a chance to take out a liberal in a liberal district, and here's the pitch, and if you like it, great, and if not, tough, but most of them said, we want to do this and we want to support you, and we understand, like, we don't agree with you on some issues, so let's just see how it goes. And then at the last minute, possible ran someone against me when I had already been running to the center, so to speak.
Sure. But the one thing that set you apart to me from anyone who even runs for office is that you're very open about everything about you. You're a guy who will openly say, like, there are politicians who will say, I'm for the legalization of marijuana, but it's not something I do. Like, you openly smoke marijuana. You have no problem admitting that. And you're very open about everything. And for some reason, I mean, we do know why, but in today's society, it's like if you do these things that aren't accepted inside the norm, you're just going to be discredited no matter what your views are, no matter what policies you're running on. That's how they're going to discredit you, which I felt like you were a guy who openly will post pictures of yourself smoking weed, and that kind of disqualifies you in the public's eyes from becoming a congressman.
Well, I didn't do all of that before running for office.
But you were open about that. I don't think you were ever a guy who would deny that.
No, I never was shy as a candidate, but saying that yes, I have smoked pot. But it's funny. That wasn't really a huge issue. That didn't. I mean, believe it or not, it did. I don't think it ever came up.
Because I remember being on your Facebook, and I remember even like weeks after the election, I think, or it might have been a few months down the line, you had a picture of with those 5-finger running shoes on, which I don't know if you're still into, because you were very into running at the time. Okay. And a bong next to you. Yeah, and I remember it was just like no one else running for Congress would ever have the balls to put this picture up. You know what I mean?
It just goes to show that part of the role of politicians is to deny reality. Help people deny reality. I
could even say, like, with the Anthony Weiner scandal, when it came out that he was, sending pictures of his penis, whatever, to some girl, I really did not care. I would like to hear more about, what he's doing in New York. I don't think, to me, that should disqualify him from being a congressman. Personally, that's kind of the world right now.
Who doesn't send naked selfies to people these days?
It's really not outside the norm. I mean, and people are like, well, he should be worrying about what's going on in New York instead of doing that. I'm pretty sure he could be a congressman and do that at the same time.
No, but the problem with Weiner was that he was cheating on his wife.
That's true.
That's a different problem, because then but there are also millions of Americans in open relationships. That's not the case. But if you're not, and then then it's a trust issue. I think that's legit. But
wait, are you saying? Do you think people in office have to be moral people?
I thought they had to be immoral.
But in your view, does that really matter if they want to stay out of our lives, which Anthony Weiner didn't, but I'm just saying if it's someone who wants to stay out of our lives but they lead an immoral lifestyle, should that even matter?
Well, that's kind of it's almost a moot point. I mean, it's kind of silly to even ask it that way. It's like, you know, if you're going to have a mugger, should your mugger be good looking or ugly? You're getting mugged, you know. Who cares? What's the problem here? So, I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but like for example, in the last presidential race, when all this stuff came out about Newt Gingrich cheating on his wife and all that, to me, it was really, as you said, kind of a minute point next to all the corruption when he was actually Speaker of the House. To me, that was a bigger issue than if he cheated on his wife.
Well, the American people don't pay attention to what's important. I mean, that's what we see in politics, and that's, you know, what I'm doing now. I think is much more powerful in shifting the paradigm.
So, do you think? And for people just joining us, Adam Kokesh, you can see him on Twitter at Adam Kokesh, and he's hosting Adam versus the Man on AdamVersusTheMan.com. So, do you think what you're doing now with your show, your podcast, Adam versus the Man, is that doing more to help the public than when you were running for Congress? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm doing now is, you know, I mean, I suppose when I was running for Congress, you know, what I was trying to do was make the message have the broadest appeal possible, where, you know, you get it to the point where it's not really changing anybody's life to say, yeah, we should follow the Constitution. It wouldn't government be better if X, Y, Z. And instead, what we're doing now is spreading a message that is for the people who are ready to hear it, and it changes their lives, and they live differently, and then they prepare other people around them for it, and they become better advocates. And it's not, you know, waking people up to the nature of government, but to an entirely different way of thinking. And in a way, you can't do that when you're working within, you know, the confines of the political system. Of course, you can be a candidate, you can get up on that soapbox, and you can say, hey, you know, get people's attention. But if you're running to win, as I was, and you know, that was a problem. It's sort of like if I knew I wasn't going to win, you know, I almost wish that I'd been speaking differently and actually using the opportunity to really wake people up.
Sure.
At a deeper level. But that's what we're doing now.
Do you see the country going more libertarian? Because part of the thing that I see happening is, yes, we have people like Rand Paul in the Senate, but he seems to be compromising on a lot of things that were libertarian views. And you who I met for the first time at a Rand Paul fundraiser where you spoke, have been really critical of Rand Paul.
Yeah, well, it's not that I've been really critical. It's that I've been, you know, just telling the truth about him. And it's that's just he's not a libertarian. I think it's not that he misled people, but I think he really led a lot of people on when he let people just sort of go along with, you know, assuming that he was just like his father.
Did you assume he was just like his father when you did events with him?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, he really hid all of his views that were contrary.
Because the thing is, I think he's definitely being groomed to be the next, you know, Republican candidate 4 years from now. But it doesn't. Not. You don't think so?
He's grooming himself.
But if he were to run for president 4 years down the line, is he really going to be any different from any of the other people we have up there? That's the problem I see.
If he gets there, he won't be by definition. You know, it's sort of like you can get there if you attach the right strings to yourself. But until the paradigm changes and the strings that it takes to get to the top aren't there, or are, you know, more attached to the public than to all of the various government special interests, then you're not going to get there.
Yeah, I just don't see him as standing on principle on a lot of things. I mean, he's a guy who I could say I'm a guy who's for more border enforcement, and we can get into that as a different issue. But he said that he was for the Arizona immigration law, you know, and whatever his views were. But now all of a sudden with Marco Rubio, he's starting to give these speeches in Spanish. He's starting to, say that we need some amnesty and all those types of things. And here's the thing. If he was a guy like Gary Johnson, who originally was for a more open border policy, I'd say, okay, at least he's standing on principle. But I think right now this is just going to get along with the Republican Party and making friends in the party.
I think Rand's, that's part of it for Rand, but he's smarter than that, and he's also trying to build as broad a base as possible. The problem is, if you want libertarians, philosophical libertarians, to be in that base, you're not going to do it with these, soft sell appeals to mainstream Republicans. But that's the thing, is a lot of this conversation is going on the assumption that Rand is a libertarian somehow philosophically, and has either perverted it with some pragmatic approach, or he's lying about what he really believes in to find a broader base or to appeal to the Republican primary voting base. But I have to reject that. I don't think the implication that Rand is a liar. I mean, that's what it's really weird to see this certain phenomenon, this denial within the libertarian movement, that a lot of libertarians are just like, oh, Rand's just lying. He's just misrepresenting his beliefs in order to win people over. And it's like, well, geez, that's a good way to lose people when if that's the case, and you're lying about what you believe in. But I think that he's a principled, honest conservative. He's misguided about the philosophy, and that's what's so strange. I think it's a lot easier to accept that, hey, not everybody around Ron Paul got the message. And that's much more believable because we've seen that. I mean, look at Jesse Benton, look at John Tate, look at so many other candidates that he's endorsed. I mean, Ted Cruz was endorsed by Ron Paul.
Yeah.
And I think Ted Cruz is not the worst guy in the Senate, but he's not one of us, and no one pretends to deny that. But it's like, oh, it's Rand Paul, and he must be just misrepresenting himself in order to get in position to run for president, and then he's going to show his true colors and be really libertarian. It's like, he's in the Senate, he's voted for war, he's
Sure.
voted for all sorts of libertarian things. I shouldn't say, because it's just things that his father wouldn't vote for.
One thing that I think sets you apart from other people with your views is you're pretty optimistic about the future. Whenever I hear you speak, you're a guy who's always saying, with technology, with social media, we're waking people up. People are more informed. They're able to just go on Google and look these things up and really find out things for themselves. And I agree with that. I think more people are becoming libertarian because of that, because I think that's just the natural progression of where you go when you learn about the Federal Reserve, where you learn about all these things going on. But the thing is, how come this isn't translating at all in who our elected officials are? We're really not seeing anyone else like Ron Paul getting elected to a position of federal power.
Well, I think it's because at the same time, a lot of us are realizing that the answer is not in politics. And it was really strange. And I had a bit of a challenge accepting this myself, hearing it from Ron Paul when he said, politics is going to nudge things one way or another, but it doesn't really change things. And he was really right. And I remember when I was getting ready to run for Congress, once I'd already committed to that particular course of action, I heard him give a speech where he said, you shouldn't try to be the next congressman that's following in my footsteps. You should think about what you can do, and maybe it's in activism or in journalism or in speaking out or in something else, but work to change the paradigm and spread the message, not to win public office. And I was like, well, crap, I'm already committed to this, but I'll keep that in mind, sir. And then afterwards, I found a much better path for myself.
Yeah, and it's working out well. I mean, you've gained so much notoriety on the internet from when I first spoke to you to now. And to be honest, I don't even know how you've done it exactly, but it's an awesome thing how many more people know the name Adam Kokesh. Even working at SiriusXM, I see people who work on hip hop channels who are not affiliated with any of the talk channels here. I've seen people in the building wearing your Adam versus the Man merchandise, and that's not a lie.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know them personally. I think they might work for Shade 45 or Hip Hop Nation channels like that, but you're informing people who probably wouldn't normally be gravitated to what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly having a lot more fun than when I was running for office.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to you don't have to watch what you're doing in terms of, should I be doing this at one time or another? Is this going to hinder me running for an election? Is this going to hinder people voting for me? You're kind of very open about who you are and what you do, and I respect that.
Well, I just hope that others will do the same.
So, fast forwarding to what you have going on now, I wanted people to know your history, but there's a lot coming in the future. You've been affiliated with a lot of protests that you've organized as peaceful protests, but that have gotten violent because of government. The last one that I could remember that really gained a lot of traction on the internet was you had the dance-off at which memorial was it at?
The
Jefferson Memorial, where you're not allowed to dance. And people can go on YouTube and look this up. They arrested people for dancing, and Adam in particular, who organized it, was choke slammed to the ground by an officer for refusing to stop dancing, and it was in a really harsh manner. I mean, had you have not been a guy who's, you're a bigger, more muscular guy with Marine training, you are trained to take a fall, but had you have not been in the physical condition that you are, you might have, really been seriously injured from that.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy to think that you've got to be, a former Marine trained in hand-to-hand combat and a rugby player who knows how to take a fall, to survive being a modern protester. But yeah, that was that was pretty interesting. I was knee in the ribs, and if I hadn't tucked my chin and slapped the ground with my leg and my outside arm, I would have taken a much greater impact, because I really was, picked up and choke slammed on the marble surface of the Jefferson Monument there. So it was certainly an interesting experience.
And that's also not the first time that you and people, involved in the movement with you have had these experiences. An even crazier experience, I thought, was around the time that I first spoke with you, and there was the the debates going on at Hofstra University between John McCain and Barack Obama, which I attended Hofstra University and spoke to you on WRHU on their radio station. Your friend, who you roomed with, I believe you said, and I think former Marine, was trampled by a horse.
Yeah. And
permanent brain damage, right?
Well, he had permanent nerve damage in his face. Whether it was permanent brain damage, I don't think it was. But yeah, Nick Morgan was an Army Iraq vet who was there. And
Army, because I said Marine.
Yeah, it's fine.
You're a Marine.
The crowd with a horse.
And it was I think he was trying to jump a gate where he wasn't supposed to be, but he easily.
No, not at this point. At the point that they charged the horse into the crowd, it was already back against the far sidewalk.
Oh wow!
I was the one. We walked up to. There was a few of us in formation.
Wait, were you at Hofstra University during this?
Yes, no, I was there. I walked up to I was one of the 6 willing to risk arrest that was just going to march into the police line, and we did, and then they pushed the crowd back, and they arrested those of us at the front. We were on a bus, and then they pushed the rest of the crowd back against the far sidewalk, and they had, riot police just pushing them back, and everything was fine. It was relatively calm, and then they had a few horse-mounted officers. And then they were kind of behind the riot police, and then one of them was just like, I don't know, I guess I'm going to charge into the crowd, and then I'm going to spin around, and then I'm going to back into people. And my friend got stomped on trying to protect others from this horse, from this lunatic officer, and got backed over, and the horse stepped on his face, and you're like, what the hell? He was lucky to have survived. And what did they do? They actually handcuffed him and arrested him. Assault on a police officer's bottom of his horse's foot kind of thing. And they brought him on the bus with us. And we were like, what the hell are you doing with him here?
Yeah.
This motherfucker needs to be in a hospital.
Were there any repercussions at all for the officer who did that?
Repercussion for the officer?
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
It's insane. So how many, actually, I have to ask before I even get into what you're doing July 4th, which is one of the main reasons I figured this would be the week to bring you on, because what you're organizing, I think, is incredible, but also insane. But how many times have you been arrested?
I don't know.
I mean, do you have any fear of it at this point?
No.
And have you ever spent any extended period of time in jail from any of this?
No more than a few days.
Okay. Any giant fines that you've had to pay?
No, I don't give money to the government when I don't have to.
Wow. All right. Well, you're I mean, I agree with what you're doing, but it's absolutely fearless to to risk arrest the way that you have so many times, trying to make a point. And I get the point that you're trying to make. But
well, it's revealing the coercive nature of government, and I hope it doesn't come to that in D.C. on Independence Day. But it's going to be really interesting to see.
Do you want to tell the people what you're organizing in D.C. on Independence Day? Because, I read about it, and I was like, all right, now I got to get Adam on the podcast.
Well, I'm glad it had that effect. It is an open carry march, and we plan on marching on Washington, D.C., starting at the. Well, you know what? Let me do this right and get the actual Facebook event description here to do it justice.
Sure.
Let's see. It's the Open Carry March on Washington. You can find it through my page, facebook.com/Adam versus a Man. The description says, on the morning of July 4, 2013, Independence Day, we will muster at the National Cemetery, and at noon, we will step off to march across the Memorial Bridge down Independence Avenue, around the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the White House, then peacefully return to Virginia across the Memorial Bridge. This is an act of civil disobedience, not a permanent event. We will march with rifles loaded and slung across our backs to put the government on notice that we will not be intimidated and cower in submission to tyranny. We are marching to mark the high water mark of government and to turn the tide. This will be a non-violent event unless the government chooses to make it violent. Should we meet physical resistance, we will peacefully turn back, having shown that free people are not welcome in Washington, and returning with the resolve that the politicians, bureaucrats, and enforcers of the federal government will not be welcome in the land of the free. You are welcome to attend as an unarmed as a supporter or armed with a recording device. And the holy crap! I'm just looking at this now. We're up to 555 people who say they're going in just 2 days here.
How many of those people do you think are really going to be armed, though? I know you will be.
Well, more importantly, actually show up. If they all show up unarmed and I'm the only one armed, I would be okay with that. But we're counting on, normally on a Facebook event, you count like 1 in 4 will actually attend. Here, we're setting the bar really low just to be as safe as possible with this. If this page gets to 10,000 attendees by June 1st, we will have the critical mass necessary to pull this off. And I put in parentheses there 1,000 actual attendees. And we will march. Please spread the word, share this event, and invite all your friends.
Do you think
people are doing that?
Do you think there's going to be officers just, as this gains momentum and July 4th comes up, do you think there's going to be officers ready to find you there and arrest you before you even do any of this?
Well, what we're doing in Virginia is entirely legal. It's only when you cross the line to the District of Columbia that it becomes hypothetical.
Wait, is it illegal? Is it legal, though, if you don't have an open carry license?
You don't need a license for open carry most places where it's allowed and not in Virginia.
Wow, that I didn't even realize. Okay. You know what? I think I've been in New York too long that's so foreign to me that you could just open carry in a state without a license.
Yeah.
So, but do you think there'll be cops waiting for you at that border to arrest you immediately before you cross over?
Right. I mean, there are only so many ways that this goes, and either they communicate with us and they say, look, if you do this, as soon as you cross over, you'll be arrested one at a time. We'll have some physical resistance so that only one person can pass at a time. We're going to have a gate up, and you're welcome to walk in and get arrested, and it'll be that. And in which case, what we're going to do is, march up to the line and let people go through one at a time and be arrested. And I honestly don't know what I would do in that situation. I'd probably just turn back.
Sure.
If they say that, and I think we prove a point. We have an important rally, and we put the government on notice. And any challenging of authority is worthwhile when it's an unjust authority, and that's what we're doing here. So it's not we don't have a specific tangible objective. Like I guess you could say the only tangible objective would be to complete the march peacefully and to be able to do the route as I described it here. To be able to circle the 3 branches of government and return peacefully to Virginia, and to have that open act of defiance, and then it should have the effect of encouraging more open acts of defiance until government is obsolete and irrelevant, and that's what this will be if this is the mark for the high water mark of government, and I really hope that it could be that. I think that's where we are historically, anyways. This is just a way of putting it on the map and saying that this is it. It's funny to hear so many people say, hey, man, why are you doing it on July 4th? Don't you know that's like a big tourist day in Washington? There are going to be a lot of families there and stuff. Can't you save the politics for some other day? And it's like, geez.
But it's symbolic, so it is a good day for it.
We could do something really important in the national American tradition of standing up for freedom on this day, or we could do like the really unpatriotic thing and sit around and watch fireworks and be good little wage slaves. It's your choice.
Which you can't even do in many states. You can't set off fireworks here in New York.
Yeah, well, you can watch them from D.C. at least.
Yeah, exactly. Ian Scotto podcast. I'm speaking with Adam Kokesh, who you could find on Twitter at Adam Kokesh, AdamVersusTheMan.com. If you want to check us out, if you're a fan of Adam, I'm on Facebook, Facebook.com/Ian Scotto podcast, and on Twitter, and I need more followers on there, at Scotto podcast. Do you think once this gains momentum that the media is going to push this out of proportion and make it look like you're trying to start a violent protest, like you guys are going to go out there to shoot people? Because you really can't underestimate the ignorance of the media with things like this.
I think they're going to have a really hard time spinning it that way, the way we've already got it laid out. And I'm really grateful for any media attention that we get for this, not just because it promotes our message and our cause, but because it's promoting this event and getting more attention to these issues and really making people think critically. And, if nothing else for that, but for that, it's really exciting. But we've already had our first hit piece from Salon.com, and, there's some slander and some, I should say libel, right, technically.
Sure.
There's some, incorrect statements. I don't think they're lies in their journalism, but there's some inaccuracies, and they obviously favor or play against this event, I should say. But the overall publicity is great, and I'm just glad that the word is being spread all of a sudden, and that there are enough people who are like, yep, 2013, we've had the Fed for 100 years, and we've been dealing with this for our entire lifetimes, and we're fed up, and we're done, and we are at critical mass now. So if all we do is end up with an unpermitted open carry rally right across the river from Washington, D.C., and it's really nothing more than that, but we have 1,000 people there. Oh, you asked specifically how many of them will be armed. I would guess it's really hard to say because it depends on how big this thing gets. But if we end up with 10,000 attendees on Facebook, I assume that would be although it seems like we're going to probably we would at this rate we'll hit 10,000 by that halfway point, which was June 1st. So we'll still have a whole other month. If we get to 20,000, and usually these things don't follow linear functions. It'll either be somewhat exponential or it'll have its curve and flatten out. But if we have tens of thousands of people that catch on because this goes mainstream in the media and a lot of people pick up on it, then probably less than half will be armed. But if it's that hardcore group, you don't know. It could be a lot more percentage wise. But we're encouraging everybody to come out, whether you want to join us and be armed or not. If you want to stay way back, if you want to stay out of police sniper range, if you want to play it that safe and you want to come out, there will still be a role for you to play in supporting this, even if you just stay completely on the Virginia side of the river.
But you could never underestimate the police breaking the law and arresting those people as well, I feel like.
Well, there's also the possibility if we have lots and lots of unarmed people that we just put the armed people in the middle.
Yeah.
And we, barge through and we make our way into the city that way.
But there's, like I said, there's always that possibility of a huge police presence just arresting all of you, I feel like. I wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility. Things like that have happened before.
It's possible. I really don't think that's going to happen. But if they decide they want to trap us on the bridge, or they want to let us into D.C. so that we actually break a law and then encircle us, that's fine. And I would hope that the people there submit peacefully to arrest, because we're not there to hurt anybody, but to expose government for what it is. And if the officers who have taken an oath to the Constitution decide that the laws are more important than the supreme law of the land, then we will be able to make that point very clearly.
Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
And my pleasure. I'm glad we were able to cover as much ground as we did, and maybe I'll get a chance again before this March, or if not, hopefully afterwards.
I'll definitely try to make it out, and if you're coming to New York anytime soon, hit me up. You got my cell phone number.
Of course.
Thanks, man.
Peace.
Well, that was an awesome talk. Pleasure to have Adam Kokesh on the podcast, and he's certainly welcome on here anytime. If he's ever in New York, I'd love to have him in studio. But man, I'm both scared and excited to see what happens at this July 4th march. When you think of Adam getting chokeslammed for starting a rally where they were dancing at a memorial or a monument, this is a much bigger thing that they're doing. I mean, to walk into the nation's capital, D.C., a very anti-gun area, with a loaded weapon, to make a point of the Second Amendment, of the right to bear arms, I totally understand where he's coming from, but very few would have the balls to do it, and that's why he's Adam Kokesh. I would have liked to have gotten into how he stays in the physical condition that he does, because I'm a guy who works out. I do not look anything like Adam Kokesh, though. Google Adam Kokesh if you've never seen him, and you'll see some pictures of him, and the man is a beast. A lot of people get out of the Marines, and they're no longer the physical specimen that they once were. This guy is in incredible shape. So I don't know what he does. I know he runs, does some running. I don't know what his routine is in the gym. So maybe if I have him back, I'll get into that. But we did cover a lot of ground. Once again, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Ian Scotto Podcast. I need more people checking out the Twitter. Please follow me, Scotto Podcast. And on Instagram, @Ian Scotto Podcast. I'm really excited for the weeks to come. I have some awesome guests lined up. Not going to tell you any of them right now because I need to confirm some stuff as well. But if all goes accordingly, the next few weeks are going to be awesome. So make sure you check it out every week. Every Monday I'm putting these up for your listening enjoyment. And I appreciate the response I've been getting. We're only a month in. The feedback has been awesome. I think people are really learning and enjoying from the podcast. And if I could get a presence the way that Adam Kokesh has somehow on the internet, I'd be very happy because he's doing it big. He's getting his name out there. And I think his message is really resonating. And we need more voices like him to resonate. So why not mine? I appreciate everybody telling others about the podcast, getting the word out there. It means a lot to me because you have no limits where this thing could go, these podcasts on the internet, and Adam is a guy who's proving it. So thanks to him for coming on this week as well. Thanks, everybody.